Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the bird of peace. There's champagne and celebrations all over the first commercial flight from Ethiopia to Eritrea in 2 decades. Airlinks have been re-established as part of the swift and stunning reconciliation between the former rivals. Also, pregnant teens in Burundi are being banned from school. Rights campaigners say that girls are being doubly punished as their sexual health is compromised if their education is. Maasai herders are being driven off their land to make way for luxury safaris. Tanzania's government's accused of prioritising foreign safari companies over indigenous communities. We take a closer look. But first, there was singing and dancing in the aisles and champagne all around as the first commercial flight from Ethiopia to Eritrea in 20 years touched down on Wednesday. 2 flights left Addis Ababa and an hour and a half later arrived in Eritrea's capital. The re-establishing of airlinks is the latest phase in a reconciliation process between the former rivals that has happened at breakneck speed since Ethiopia's new president Abiy Ahmed took office in April. New prime minister, excuse me. Now, Eritrea was once part of Ethiopia, and a brutal 2-year border war broke out in 1998. That evolved into a bitter Cold War, and its end has emotionally reunited families.
It has been like 22 years, and because of the fight between Ethiopia and Eritrea, we had no even address to communicate with our family. But since Ethiopia and Eritrea create peace, we have come here. I have come here to look for my grand family.
Previously, a lot of Eritreans came to my church, either through Dubai or through Sudan. Today, God has broken the border and made both people come together in love. The wall of hate has been demolished and a bridge of love has been built.
Well, Elias Messeret is in Addis Ababa and he joins us now with more. Elias, Ethiopian Airlines says that it's going to start operating a daily return flight between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Why is all of this quite so exciting for passengers? Who's going to be on those planes?
It's exciting because Ethiopia and Eritrea share a lot of cultural, social, and almost many other, especially family ties. These ties have been broken for the past 2 decades since the border war broke out between the 2 countries. Families who were not able to cross the 2 countries' border in the past used to go to Sudan and then cross the borders. This is quite difficult. But now the flights have resumed. Embassies are now being opened on both capitals and phone lines are restored. In fact, I know some people in Ethiopia are now calling complete strangers in Eritrea just to say hi. This flight to us very momentous because it is the first in 20 years. Ethiopians that we have separated from their family members in Eritrea, prominent personalities, journalists, and others were on today's flight to Asmara.
Now, the rapprochement is going to benefit both Eritrea and Ethiopia economically. But what are the hurdles in implementing at least this promise by Abiy to respect the 2002 borders?
I think the actual withdrawal of troops from the border town of Baden and other locations, also establishing trust after several years of mistrust between the 2 countries, and also handing over some sensitive locations to the other side will be the challenges. Besides, there were some protesters in recent days in border areas against Ethiopia's acceptance of the border deal, which was signed in 2002. Surely the changes are happening in Ethiopia seem to be going to bring some changes in Eritrea as well. For one, Eritrea has kept democratic institutions in dark fighting the border war with Ethiopia. And that is going to change now, I think. And in fact, today, a Paris-based radio station called Radio Arena is reporting that 400 members of a Pentecostal religious group were released earlier today after serving several years behind bars.
Thanks very much. Elias Messeret there for us in Addis. Now, Wednesday marked 100 years since the birth of the late South African anti-apartheid icon and President Nelson Mandela. The UN released a new stamp at its General Assembly as the Secretary-General spoke of Mandela's importance as a beacon for the values of peace, forgiveness and service. In South Africa itself, Mandela Day was marked throughout the country with exhibitions, music and events. President Cyril Ramaphosa pledged to donate half his salary to charity and headed to Mandela's birthplace in Eastern Cape. Former US President Barack Obama hosted a youth leadership project in Johannesburg and told hundreds of young people there that Mandela had been a key inspiration to him. Tributes were also paid to Mandela off the continent, and a memorial stone was unveiled at London's Westminster Abbey in a special ceremony. Now, Burundi's been warned that it's violating the human rights of its children with a law introduced last month that prevents pregnant teenagers and young expectant fathers from going to school. The move has been slammed as being a double punishment for girls, as campaigners say that it will be difficult to identify fathers for exclusion. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
Pierre Nkurunziza's government had banned miniskirts and nail varnish in schools. Now it's decided that pregnant schoolgirls cannot return to their classrooms once their child is born. The official aim is to protect social morals.
Imagine a girl my age becomes pregnant. It's shameful. Now that won't happen in class. It's a good law. At school, we must only focus on our studies, on our future.
In Burundi, where freedom of expression is limited according to activists, some parents said they strongly supported the new law.
Students must be careful, and if the authorities implemented this measure, it must be the right one. The serious students will finish their school year enthusiastically. If the others get tricked, that's their fault.
But NGOs say the measure will hurt victims of sexual violence. Many girls will miss school and have to raise their children alone.
We know women who had children at a very young age and who today are very responsible people, very important people in our society and in their families. Some represent us in our institutions, despite what might have happened at a young age.
According to the UN, in Burundi, 7% of girls aged 15 to 19 have at least one child. The authorities said the law also concerned young fathers. They will have to leave school and start apprenticeships.
Tanzania is accused of making tens of thousands of Maasai homeless since their houses were burned down. They're being driven from their land as the government makes money from the sale of it or by granting of access to foreign tourists in search of safari adventures. Pierre Delreux tells us more.
For the Maasai, this is their home, their ancestral land. But for visiting tourists, the territory in and around the legendary Serengeti in northern Tanzania is a beautiful holiday destination.
So how cool is it to see the animals in nature like this?
It's really cool.
Worth the trip?
Yeah, I think it's worth the trip.
Tanzania turned the Serengeti National Park into a wildlife sanctuary in the 1950s, forcibly relocating local Maasai families. Since then, the herdsmen have struggled to graze their livestock and preserve their pastoral traditions.
My life is just depend to this cattle, so I need the big places, the big place to live for them. If now it's very difficult because of the problem who bringing by those Arabs.
Over the few past decades, Maasai herdsmen have increasingly had their territory taken from them, often by force, and sold for profit. The United Arab Emirates royal family owns and operates a private reserve nearby, sold to them by the Tanzanian government. A situation enforced by local police, often with extreme violence.
When the police came, I told them I wasn't doing anything wrong. This is our land. But they answered, this land was owned by the Emiratis. I was still talking when one of them shot me in the head. What did we do to deserve this?
The Emirati-owned property is just a few minutes away. 4,000 square kilometers, a private hunting ground with no clear borders. According to government officials, the Maasai are not welcome there.
Yeah, the Arabs are there. That's true. The investors and, all this problem. Our land is owned by the president and nobody else owns the land in Tanzania. They don't have a land. They can stay there on the proper areas.
For many of the 800,000 Maasai living in Tanzania, the situation has become critical. And many villages have taken the Tanzania government to the East African Court of Justice, demanding the end of evictions and an unequivocal recognition of their right to the land.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Join me this week in central Portugal. It's here. Last year, the area suffered the country's deadliest forest fires on record. The poor emergency response was largely to blame, but so too was eucalyptus. Now it's a combustible tree, but the local economy relies on it. So is Portugal cultivating a profitable plant or harvesting disaster? We find out on Down to Earth.
Down to Earth, presented by Molly Hall on France 24 and France24.com.